Hello, my name is Drema, and I was born the third daughter, the accident no one planned and no one wanted to claim. 3 nights ago, my sister hit me so hard I bled onto our mother's dinner table. And while I was wiping blood off my face in the bathroom mirror, my mom was sending me a text. "You deserved it. Stay away from us." I did exactly what she said. But 3 days later, they were the ones at my door, shaking, begging, holding everything they thought I wouldn't be strong enough to burn down. They used my silence to build a lie that spanned years. But what happens when the quiet ones start speaking? You still think family means love? Then tell me, why did mine treat me like a threat? And what would you have done in my place? The first thing I noticed when I walked into my mother's house that evening wasn't the smell of roasted chicken or the faint melody coming from the old piano. It was the silence beneath it all. The kind of silence that presses on your ribs and makes breathing feel like an interruption. It was my 31st birthday, but you wouldn't have known it. The dining table was already set when I arrived, though I'd only been invited an hour before. Sable sat at the end of the table, gleaming in a new silk blouse, her hair pulled back just enough to show off the diamond earrings she probably bought with money she didn't earn. Verena, my mother, was sipping white wine, one leg crossed over the other, pretending to scroll through her phone. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Traffic was bad," I said softly, setting the small bouquet I'd brought on the counter. Sable's eyes flicked toward it and then back to her glass. "You didn't have to bring anything," she said, her tone too bright. "It's not like we expected you." I took a seat across from her, trying to steady my breathing. The air in that house always felt thick with old arguments that never really ended. Dinner began in a slow, uneasy rhythm. Forks clinked against plates. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock. Finally, Sable raised her wine glass and smiled in that rehearsed public way she did on her social media videos. "To family," she said, pausing just long enough to let the sarcasm settle. "And to Drema, still single, still working that job with all the spreadsheets, right?" I felt my jaw tighten, but I forced a small smile. "Yeah, it pays the bills. Keeps me busy." Verena set her glass down, her voice calm but sharp. "Not everything in life is numbers, sweetheart. Maybe if you focused more on people, things would be different." There it was, the familiar sting, wrapped in maternal advice. I tried to let it slide, but the wine in my stomach churned. "I focus plenty on people," I said evenly, "just not the ones who think success means pretending." Sable let out a soft laugh. "Pretending? You think I'm pretending? Please. You sit in your apartment with your cat and your takeout boxes and call that real life." "Enough," Verena murmured, though there was no real reprimand in her tone. The room seemed to shrink. I looked from one to the other, realizing how little space there was left for me in this family. Then, like someone flipping a switch, Sable's face changed. The smile vanished. "You think you're better than us," she said flatly. "You've always thought that." "That's not what I said." "No," she hissed, "but it's what you mean." I felt my pulse quicken. "You're drunk, Sable." She stood up, eyes glassy. "Drunk? I'm honest." Before I could react, she grabbed the nearest thing, one of Mom's heavy ceramic plates, and swung it. It hit me across the cheek with a sickening thud. The world tilted. The taste of iron filled my mouth. For a second, everything stopped. The plate slipped from her hand and shattered on the hardwood. I pressed my fingers to my face, feeling the warmth of blood seeping between them. My vision blurred. Verena didn't move. She just stared, her lips parted slightly as if she might say something, then didn't. Sable took a step back. "See what you made me do?" I stumbled, gripping the edge of the table. "Don't start," she snapped. "You push and push until everyone snaps. You always do." My mother's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, tapped a few buttons, and then looked back at me. "Go clean yourself up, Drema." Her tone was cool, practiced. "No one needs a scene tonight." I walked toward the hallway bathroom, the walls closing in around me. Every step left a faint trail of red on the polished floor. Behind me, I heard a fork scrape against a plate, followed by Sable's shaky laugh. In the mirror, my reflection looked like someone else's. Blood streaked down my chin. My cheek was already swelling. I turned on the faucet, let the cold water run, and pressed a damp towel against my face. Memories flickered. My father's hand resting gently on my forehead when I was little, the sound of his laugh echoing through this same hallway. He used to say this house had a heartbeat. Tonight, it was just noise and ghosts. Through the door, I heard them talking again. Not whispers, full, careless laughter, as if nothing had happened. Something inside me cracked, quietly, almost neatly. When I finally stepped out, no one looked up. The dishes had been cleared, the music turned back on. Verena was texting. I walked to the entryway, picked up my purse. My hand trembled as I reached for my phone. A notification flashed. A new message from my mother. It said, "You deserved it." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My knees felt weak, but I stayed standing. I wanted to ask her why she hated me enough to let this happen. But the truth was, I already knew. I had stopped being her idea of a daughter the moment I stopped being useful. I slipped the phone into my bag and walked out into the cool night air. The porch light flickered once before going out. By the time I reached my car, the shaking had started. My face throbbed with every heartbeat. I sat there for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. The drive back to my apartment blurred by in streaks of yellow light. I parked, climbed the stairs slowly, and closed the door behind me. My phone buzzed again. I pulled it out, half hoping it was someone else. But it wasn't. It was a new notification. "Verena has blocked you." For a moment, I just stood there. Then I scrolled back through the last message and reread it. "You deserved it." Those 3 words hollowed me out. I washed my face, changed into an old sweatshirt, and sat on the couch in the dark. The sound of the refrigerator humming filled the room. I could still feel the weight of the plate, the sharp sting, the indifference in my mother's eyes. I tried to tell myself it was just one night, but deep down, I knew. It wasn't just about tonight. It was years of small cuts, quiet dismissals, all leading here. When I finally lay down, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flash of white ceramic, the spill of red on the tablecloth. The worst part wasn't the blood. It was knowing it meant nothing to them. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't cry when I washed my face, not even when I saw my reflection, distorted, bruised. The corner of my lip cracked open like a wound no one would bother to bandage. But when I was halfway down Haywood Road, walking past shuttered shops and the neon buzz of the 24-hour diner, my phone buzzed again. I had been holding a wadded-up tissue to my face, not bothering to hide the swelling. A part of me hoped someone would stop and ask, "Hey, are you okay?" But nobody did. People don't get involved, not really. Not unless it's their problem or it gives them something to tweet about. I glanced down at the screen. One new message. My fingers hovered over the notification like it might burn. "Stay away from us." That was all. 5 words. A boundary not just drawn, but carved in stone. Verena's name was still at the top of the message thread, but the little profile photo, a picture of her from some gala 10 years ago, looked like a stranger. My mother had texted me those words without a hint of hesitation. No explanation, no emotion. I stopped in front of the diner, stepped aside so the late-night crowd could pass, and leaned against the brick wall. The light from the neon sign reflected off the bruises forming beneath my eye. I took a breath, long and slow, but it did nothing to settle the thud in my chest. The words echoed louder than any slap ever could. I was less than nothing to them. My mind, already in pieces, cracked again. This time, a deeper kind of break. Not from physical pain, but from the quiet acceptance that I was no longer part of the family. Not the messy sibling, not the black sheep. Just erased. The streets were nearly empty by the time I made it to my apartment. I didn't rush. Every step felt like a negotiation between anger and grief. The key turned in the lock, and as I stepped inside, the silence wrapped itself around me like a too familiar coat. I turned off the hallway light, dropped my purse on the floor, and locked the door behind me. Then I slid down onto the hardwood, knees pulled to my chest, phone still in hand. The screen lit up in the dimness. I scrolled through the texts. "You deserved it." Stay away from us. I deleted everything else. Not those I kept. I placed them in a new folder, labeled simply, Receipts. Because one day, I might forget the details, the tone, the exact moment. But I needed something to look back on, something to remind me of where the fracture began. Something to remind me that silence hadn't protected me. I don't know how long I sat there, the screen dimming and brightening in cycles as if time was nudging me forward. Eventually, I stood, walked to the small kitchenette, poured myself a glass of water I didn't really want, and turned on my laptop. The screen glowed in the darkness. I opened my photo library. Birthday cakes with uneven frosting, me blowing out candles, usually alone, a fifth-grade piano recital, blurry, off-center, my dad's hospital bed, my hand over his. He had been so thin, so quiet. I remember the beeping machines more than our final conversations. In every photo where the family was present, Thanksgiving, Easter brunch, vacations I barely remembered, I was either blurred, cropped, or facing the wrong direction. I saw the patterns now. I wasn't the overlooked daughter. I was never meant to be included. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being a person to them and started becoming a placeholder. The family scapegoat, the story they told when they needed a cautionary tale, a way to bond over shared disappointment. You were never meant to be part of that picture, a voice whispered inside me, and I believed it. The weight of the realization wasn't heavy, it was hollow, like walking through a house that once had life in every room, but now stood empty, staged, and waiting to be sold. I closed the laptop and stood slowly. My body ached, not from the blow, but from carrying years of that quiet erasure. Then I remembered the envelope. It had been sitting in the back of the drawer since the funeral, sealed in Thurston's clean handwriting. My father always used a fountain pen, said it made the words feel more real. I'd never opened it, not because I didn't want to, but because I was scared of what it might say, or worse, what it wouldn't. I opened the drawer, slid the envelope out, and held it up to the light. I didn't open it, not yet. I took it back to the couch, sat down, and rested it on my lap. Then I pulled out my journal, the one I hadn't touched in months. I opened to a blank page and wrote slowly, deliberately, like every word needed to land somewhere solid. They erased me, so I'll write myself back in, not to their story, to my own. I will become someone worth remembering, even if it breaks them. My pen hovered over the page. I added 2 more words, no mercy. I closed the journal and placed it beside the envelope. The night air felt different, even through the closed window. Not lighter, just colder. Clearer. I glanced at my phone one last time before plugging it in. I created one final folder on my desktop. Inside it, I placed the screenshots of the messages, the photos of my face, the hospital bill from the urgent care visit I made after the last time they lost control. Folder name? Receipts. I whispered aloud, more to myself than anything. If I ever forget, let this remind me. The glow from the screen dimmed again, and I knew, tomorrow I'd open the letter. But tonight, I slept. Not because I was at peace, but because I needed strength for what came next. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the blinds in thin, hesitant lines. I woke up on the couch, my neck stiff, my eyes swollen from a sleep that never reached the kind of depth that heals anything. The apartment was still. Even the refrigerator seemed quieter than usual, as if the whole room was holding its breath. I poured a cup of coffee, though it tasted more like habit than comfort, and sat cross-legged on the floor. The envelope lay on the coffee table, untouched. For a long moment, I just stared at it, tracing my father's handwriting with my eyes. His letters always leaned slightly to the right, firm, decisive, the same way he used to speak when he wanted me to listen. I reached for a small kitchen knife, slid it gently under the flap, and opened the envelope. The paper inside was thick and slightly yellowed, folded twice. When I unfolded it, I caught the faint scent of his cologne, the one he'd worn every Sunday, even when he had nowhere to go. "Drema," it began, in ink that had bled faintly into the paper fibers. "You were never the loudest, but you were always the strongest. I leave this to you because I trust your silence more than their smiles." The words blurred for a moment as my eyes welled up. I read it again, slower this time, until the meaning sank into the space between heartbeats. He saw me, not the version they mocked, not the disappointment they told themselves I'd become. Me, the quiet one who never asked for much, but always stayed to clean up their messes. I folded the letter halfway, pressing my palm against it like I could feel his warmth through the paper. A part of me wanted to stop there, to let that validation be enough. But there was more written below. Before reading on, I leaned back against the couch, closing my eyes. And just like that, I was back at his funeral. The memory came with smells first. The wax of the candles, the rain-soaked coats, the bitter scent of lilies that had begun to wilt. I remember standing near the back of the church while Verena wept loudly in the front pew. Sable sat beside her, patting her shoulder for effect, a tissue delicately held between two fingers like a prop. People kept turning to look at them, whispering, "Such a devoted family." No one noticed me. When it came time for the eulogies, Sable stood up, her voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. "Dad taught us to be brave," she said. "He always believed in hard work, family, and forgiveness." She didn't mention me once. Not my name, not my care for him when he was sick, not the nights I stayed at the hospital while she posted about self-care Sundays. When the ceremony ended, everyone filed out, umbrellas blooming in the gray drizzle. I stayed. The church emptied. Even the priest had gone home. It was just me, my father's closed casket, and the faint echo of rain on stained glass. I whispered, "I'll stay until the end, Dad." And I did. I waited by the graveside until the last shovel of dirt fell, until the caretaker gave me a sympathetic nod and told me to go home. But I didn't go home that night. I went back to the house I grew up in, his house, and walked through it one last time. Every corner smelled like memory, his pipe tobacco, the faint hint of aftershave, the faint lemon polish on the wood floors. I stood in his office, the shelves still lined with law books and a half-finished crossword puzzle on the desk. There, sitting neatly in the center, was the envelope addressed to me. I didn't cry when I picked it up. I didn't say goodbye out loud. I just took the letter, turned off the light, and left. That night, I packed a small suitcase. I didn't take photos or keepsakes, just the letter, my laptop, and a few changes of clothes. I remember walking out without looking back, hearing Verena's voice echo faintly from her bedroom. She was laughing on the phone with Sable about some charity event. It was as if the funeral had never happened. I closed the front door behind me for the last time. When I opened my eyes again, the coffee beside me had gone cold. The sunlight had moved across the floor, cutting a line of gold through the shadow. I unfolded the rest of the letter and continued reading. The second half wasn't sentimental. It was precise, methodical, the way my father's mind always worked. There were account numbers, legal references, and a short explanation. This money was meant to keep the family together, but you're the only one who ever tried. At the bottom, one more line. If you ever need to defend yourself, let this be your sword. I sat there for a while, holding the paper, feeling both the weight and the relief of it. It wasn't just inheritance, it was intention. He knew what they were capable of. He'd prepared for it, and he'd trusted me to finish what he couldn't. For the first time since his death, the guilt that had been lodged in my chest began to shift. Maybe I wasn't weak for walking away. Maybe leaving wasn't betrayal, it was survival. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside my laptop. Then, with deliberate calm, I scanned each page. My fingers didn't shake this time. I saved the digital copy in a new folder. Title: Legacy. It sat right next to the other one, Receipts. I looked at both folders on the screen, side by side like a quiet promise. One for what they'd done to me, the other for what my father had left behind. The past and the defense. For years, I'd been reacting to their cruelty like a cornered animal. But this was control. I closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and leaned back on the couch. The world outside hummed faintly, car tires on pavement, a distant bark of a dog, the ordinary rhythm of people who weren't falling apart. Inside, it felt like something was finally settling into place. I whispered into the stillness. He chose me, not them, not the performance. The words didn't come from pride. They came from truth. I reached for my phone, opened the encrypted Drive app, and uploaded both folders. The progress bar crawled slowly across the screen. When it finished, I smiled faintly, feeling something shift inside me. A spark, small but alive. "Let's see how far this rabbit hole goes," I said quietly, the faintest hint of steel in my voice. Then I set the phone down, turned off the lamp, and sat in the half-light of a new morning that didn't feel like the end anymore. The moment I opened that file, the ground beneath their lies started to crack. It wasn't a loud rupture. It was quiet, like a slow creak from under the floorboards. But I knew. That sound doesn't come without collapse. The folder blinked to life. Private, for Dreama only. I clicked once. The screen shifted. A list of documents began loading. PDFs, audio files, emails, scanned handwritten notes. Everything labeled with dates, initials, and folder names only someone like my father would think to organize in that exacting way. Before I could even open the first file, my phone vibrated on the table beside me. Notifications were coming in faster than I could swipe them away. Instagram, texts, emails. They all had one name in common. Sable. I hadn't posted anything in weeks. I hadn't liked a photo, commented on anyone's vacation video, or reshared a thinking of you quote. But here I was, tagged, screenshot, and served up like a cautionary tale. I opened the app and braced myself. The post was a long caption under a photo of her and Verena, arms linked, smiles carefully sculpted. The caption read, "Sometimes family turns toxic. You love them, you support them, and still, they try to tear you down. This week has been hard. I didn't want to share this, but I think people need to understand that letting go, even of blood, is sometimes the healthiest choice." Then came the carousel. Images from my childhood. Photos I thought were buried. Me in braces with tangled hair. A school report card with a C circled in red. A cropped shot of me in the background of Sable's engagement party where I looked tired, unsmiling. Out of context, every single one. The comments flooded in. "You're so strong, Sable. Family can be the most toxic. Sending you love, girl. Been there? Cut that negativity out." My stomach flipped. I couldn't look away, even as my pulse pounded behind my eyes. Each word blurred into a thick smear of disgust. Not theirs, mine. Disgust at how easily they bought it. I scrolled to see who had liked it. I didn't want to, but I did. Megan. I hadn't spoken to her in months, but she'd known me since we were 12. We had been each other's person, or so I thought. She was the one I cried with the night Dad passed, the one who promised to stand next to me if anything ever blew up with my mother or sister. I opened our message thread. "Hey, you saw Sable's post?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished. Then, I did. I don't want to get in the middle of it. Hope you're okay. An hour later, she unfollowed me. I didn't text back. I didn't delete the thread either. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the blank wall ahead of me, the one where I used to hang my framed degree. I'd taken it down last month, not out of shame, but because I didn't want to keep proving anything to anyone. The shame wasn't mine. And yet, it stuck to my skin like a second layer. I tried to shift focus. I had to. So I clicked back to the folder. Private, for Dreama only, and opened a document titled May 14th, Estate Prep. Halfway through reading the file, another email popped up. Subject, interview status. I hesitated. I'd applied to a mid-level analyst position with a nonprofit just before all this had gone down. I had 3 rounds of interviews, and the final one felt like it had gone well. They said they'd call me early next week. I clicked, Dreama, thank you for taking the time to meet with us. After careful consideration, we've decided to move forward with another candidate. We appreciate your interest and wish you all the best in your career. No reason, no explanation, just done. I checked LinkedIn. 3 connections gone, not unfriended, just disappeared. I searched them. Their accounts still existed. I had been blocked. I closed the lid of my laptop and sat in silence, letting the waves hit one by one. They didn't just cut me out, they replaced me with a story they could all agree on. A version of me who was petty, bitter, unstable. A sister who always needed help. A daughter who could never let things go. A person they could hate together and feel righteous about it. That was the version of me they invented. And the world believed it because it was easier. Because no one likes a woman who keeps receipts. I stood, walked over to the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror. Not to check the bruises, they were fading now, but to look at the person behind the eyes, the one they refused to name in their posts, the one who stayed silent while they spun their narrative. I saw her, and I knew she wasn't done. Returning to my desk, I deleted every social media app, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, gone. They weren't helping me, only feeding the story. I uninstalled everything except my secure file vault and encrypted email. Then I pulled open the drawer that still held a few things from my father, legal pads, pens, a thumb drive labeled in his handwriting, May 14th, estate prep. I inserted it. The screen flickered once. Then it came to life. A list of files. One folder at the top blinked. Private, for Drama only. I took a deep breath and double-clicked. Inside, a spreadsheet of financial records, notes from meetings, copies of email exchanges, some between Verena and Sable, others with lawyers. My name appeared again and again. Not as a participant, but as the target. They had planned things, years ago, to shift assets, to lock me out, to make sure, when Dad passed, that nothing came to me, despite what he told them, despite what he clearly wanted. The email exchanges were damning, cold, strategic. Sable had written, "Just make sure she's not listed on any of the paperwork. If she asks questions, we'll say she's unstable. No one listens to her anyway." Verena responded, "She's too busy pretending to be someone important. Let her keep playing house in her one bedroom. We'll handle the real business." I scrolled down, stunned into stillness. My hand trembled, but not with fear, not anymore. I downloaded the entire folder and saved it to my encrypted drive. Then I created a new folder titled Evidence. It would sit next to receipts and legacy. The trifecta. The damage they did. The truth he left behind. The proof of both. That night, I didn't call anyone. I didn't post. I didn't respond. But I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Clarity. When I first opened the next document in that folder, I didn't realize what I was looking at. It was a stack of scanned legal papers, the kind with dense language that only lawyers and the people who create problems need to understand. But then I saw it. My name, typed clearly. Primary trustee, Drema Thurston. My breath caught in my throat. I scrolled through the pages, my eyes moving faster as the words began to make sense. This wasn't just any document, it was my father's will, the official, notarized version. The one we were told didn't exist anymore because of revisions. The one Verena said had been handled privately. The signature was his, unmistakable, steady, intentional. A line at the bottom read, "This document supersedes any prior version." I felt my entire chest go tight. They lied. They had stood in that funeral home, handed me a generic folder with my name misspelled on the front, and told me there was nothing left. "Your father loved you," Verena had said, "but you know how practical he was." Practical. The same word she used when she donated half his suits to charity before the week was over. The anger that rose in me wasn't wild. It was cold, focused, like the slow burn of metal heating under pressure. I scrolled further. The language was clear, too clear to twist. If Drema Thurston is not consulted or involved in the family's use of funds, all disbursements are hereby null and void. Every line I read was another blow against their carefully constructed story. The family estate wasn't theirs to control, it was mine to protect, and they had built their little empire on top of a lie. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Sable's new SUV, the home renovations Verena bragged about to her bridge club, the donations made in her name to the Historical Society. It all came from this money, my father's money. I grabbed a notepad and started writing. Every transaction I could remember, every purchase that didn't add up. I'd worked with numbers long enough to see the pattern even before the proof existed. They'd used him. They were still using him. It was nearly noon when the phone rang. The sound startled me. Hardly anyone called anymore. The screen lit up. Mom? I hesitated, thumb hovering over ignore, then answered, curiosity and anger fighting for control. Hello? Sweetheart? Verena's voice came through, soft, tremulous, the tone she used when she wanted something. It's been so long. Her voice cracked just enough to sound rehearsed. I didn't want to tell you like this, but I have cancer. I froze. What? It's stage 2, she continued quickly. They caught it early, but it's a lot to handle. She paused for breath, or maybe for effect. I didn't want you to hear it from anyone else. Every instinct in me told me it wasn't true. The pauses were too deliberate, the emotion too precise. Where are you being treated? I asked. My voice came out calm, steady. At Mission Hospital, she said, like she'd prepared that detail. The oncologist's name is Dr. Bowers. Lovely man. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. And what exactly do you want from me, Mom? A beat of silence. I thought maybe you'd come visit. We could talk. Maybe start over. Start over, I repeated. After everything you've done? I don't want to fight anymore, Drema, she said. Life is too short. That sentence hit differently, mostly because it was one she'd said before, to guilt me into forgiving things that didn't deserve forgiveness. I'll call you back, I said quietly. Don't wait too long, she murmured. You might regret it. I hung up. I sat in the stillness, my pulse loud in my ears. Part of me wanted to believe her, that maybe beneath all the manipulation there was still something maternal. But my gut, the same gut that warned me the night Sable first asked me to sign a small tax form, knew better. I opened my laptop again and searched for Mission Hospital. I called the oncology department, asked to confirm a patient named Verena Thurston. The nurse on the other end sounded polite but firm. I'm sorry, there's no one here by that name. I thanked her, hung up, and stared out the window. The late afternoon sun hit the trees in the courtyard outside my building, their leaves trembling like they couldn't decide which way the wind was blowing. Fine, verification always told the truth. I called my cousin Lisa, who lived in Florida and usually acted as the unofficial family gossip. Hey, Lisa, it's Drema. There was a pause. Wow, long time. Everything okay? Have you heard anything about Mom being sick? Sick? She repeated. No, why? She said she has cancer. Lisa laughed, short, nervous. Cancer? She's fine. She's been posting about her self-care retreat. She's renting a cottage in Savannah for 2 weeks. I closed my eyes. Of course, Lisa kept talking, but I barely heard her. Every word from Verena's mouth had been another act in a lifelong play. She wasn't sick. She just wanted to lure me back. I thanked Lisa, hung up, and let the silence return. I opened my voice recorder, pressed the button, and began speaking. My words were slow, even, deliberate. Mom, if you ever call me again with lies, I will expose everything, including the will. No shaking hands, no raised tone, just finality. I sent it as a voice message and placed the phone face down on the table. 5 minutes passed. 10, no reply. The quiet felt different this time, not heavy, but clean. I stood, stretched, and poured myself another cup of coffee. Then I opened a new Excel document. The columns looked like potential. I titled it, Timeline of Financial Manipulation. One by one, I began entering dates, house sale, vehicle purchase, charity donations. I was done playing the victim. I was building a case. As the sky outside shifted from gold to gray, I finished the last entry and saved the file. I looked at the 3 folders lined up neatly on my screen. Receipts, legacy, evidence, and smiled faintly. Let's tighten the noose slowly, I whispered. Because sometimes revenge doesn't need fire, it just needs patience. I knew the second I hit save on the last spreadsheet entry that they wouldn't take it quietly. The two of them, Verena and Sable, were predators who thrived on control. Taking it away, even legally, would wound them deeper than any insult could. The first sign came that Tuesday morning. The email alert from the bank arrived just as I was making coffee. I wiped my hands on a towel and opened my laptop. My father's access portal blinked at me. That familiar login page that had once made me nervous now felt like armor. I typed in his credentials, verified the two-step code sent to my phone, and stared at the account summary. The Thurston family estate. Active. Balance. High enough to make anyone dangerous. I opened the settings and selected Trustee Override. The system asked for confirmation 3 times. My fingers didn't shake. Confirm Override. Disable external withdrawals. Require dual authorization. The confirmation email arrived within seconds. All withdrawals and financial operations are now frozen pending your approval. I closed my laptop and exhaled, letting the quiet satisfaction settle in my chest. This wasn't vengeance, it was precision. Exactly the kind of thing my father had trained me to do. By noon, my phone was buzzing non-stop. Unknown numbers, local area codes, a few I recognized but didn't care to answer. Then a text appeared from a contact saved long ago but renamed simply unknown. You're out of control. This isn't your money. Another followed. This is why we cut you off. You always ruin things. I muted the phone. They could scream into the void for all I cared. I spent the rest of the day working from home, headphones in, the hum of classical music keeping me focused. Around 5, I took a walk through the courtyard, letting the cold air ground me. By the time I got back upstairs, there were 23 missed calls. Then I saw it. My phone buzzed again. This time, a push notification from a site I hadn't visited in years. Sable's blog. New post. I shouldn't have clicked it. I knew better. But morbid curiosity has its own gravity. The headline read, "When mental health hurts the whole family." My stomach dropped. The first line, "Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes help is refused. Sometimes all you can do is step away." Below the text was an attached file. I knew that file. I'd seen it once, locked in my medical records, the admission note from my brief stay at the behavioral health unit 3 years ago. She'd leaked it. She'd leaked my private hospital document. The comments had already begun stacking up beneath her post. Wow, poor Sable. Can't imagine dealing with that. People like that never change. Good for you for setting boundaries. I sat motionless, the words tunneling into me like heat through glass. I clicked the file and read my own history, rewritten in her narrative. There was no mention of the fact that I checked myself in voluntarily, after months of watching my father fade in front of me, of losing sleep for days at a time, of feeling like the air in the house itself was suffocating me. Verena had told me back then, "You're overreacting. Everyone gets tired. Don't make it about you." Sable was filming a brand deal that weekend, posting smiling videos from a hotel pool while I sat in a sterile hospital room, trying to convince myself that taking care of my mind didn't make me weak. And now, she'd turned that moment, my lowest point, into her shield. I stood, pacing the room, my fists clenched so tight the skin on my palms burned. I thought about posting something in response. My cursor hovered over the compose button on Instagram for a long moment. Do I defend myself? Do I fight her publicly? No. They wanted noise. I would give them silence. And consequences. I closed the browser, grabbed my phone, and called the one person who could actually help. My lawyer, Jessica. She answered on the second ring. "Drema, you okay?" "I need to talk about privacy law," I said, voice steady but low. "Someone published confidential medical information without consent." There was a pause. "Family? Who else?" "Send me the link," she said immediately. "And don't respond publicly. I'll handle this quietly first." I forwarded her the post and sat at the kitchen table, tracing circles on the surface with my fingertip. The air in the apartment felt too thick again, the way it used to back in that hospital. After the call, I poured myself a glass of water, set it down, and let my mind drift back to that week 3 years ago. It had started with exhaustion, nothing dramatic, just fatigue that never seemed to end. Dad had been on oxygen by then, and I was working full-time while caring for him. Verena promised she'd help, but she needed time for herself. Sable had flown out to film something important. When he died, I didn't cry right away. I cleaned the house, sorted the paperwork, arranged the funeral. I stayed busy until my body couldn't do it anymore. That's when I drove myself to the hospital. I remember walking up to the receptionist and saying, "I think I need to stop before I break something I can't fix." They admitted me overnight. Just a few days of rest and therapy, no medication, no scandal, just help. But in this family, needing help was weakness, and weakness was unforgivable. Now, they were using that against me. I picked up the glass of water and drank slowly, forcing each swallow down like it might anchor me. By the time the sun dipped below the buildings outside, Jessica called back. "I've reviewed everything," she said. "That's a clear violation of HIPAA if the hospital records were accessed illegally. Even if she got them from you somehow, using them publicly is defamation. You've got a case." A case. The words felt like oxygen. "Do you want to make it public?" Jessica asked. "Because once we file, it will go on record." I looked out the window. The lights of Asheville flickered faintly, like the city was blinking back at me. "Not yet," I said. "Let's make them think they're safe first." Jessica chuckled softly. "You sound like your father." "Maybe that's not a bad thing." We hung up. I walked back to my laptop, reopened my files, and began categorizing everything again. Dates, transactions, screenshots, now medical leaks. My desk looked like a crime board waiting for string. Each new line I added wasn't anger, it was structure. Because rage without order was chaos, and I'd spent too many years living in their chaos. When I finished, I leaned back and stared at the folders lined up neatly on my screen. Receipts, legacy, evidence, and now a new one, defense. The night hummed softly outside. I let myself breathe, deep and even, then whispered to no one in particular, "You wanted war. I'll give you precision." After freezing their accounts and watching them panic online, I thought I'd seen the worst of their tricks. I was wrong. Sable always had one more performance in her, one more way to twist the knife just enough to make me bleed and call it an accident. It started early Thursday morning. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, dragging me out of a half-sleep. The screen glowed with a message from my credit monitoring app. "New credit inquiry detected. Home equity line of credit, $120,000. I frowned. I didn't own a home anymore. I scrolled further. Application date, last night. Social security number, mine. Address, hers. A chill rippled through me. I called the number listed on the alert, my voice steady, even though my pulse wasn't. "Thank you for calling First Atlantic," a woman said politely. "How may I help you?" "I'm calling about a credit application under my name. I didn't file it." She paused to check the system. "Can I confirm your social and date of birth?" I gave them. She murmured. "Yes, it was submitted online around 10:42 p.m. It's under your name and social, but the contact email doesn't match. It's sable.thurstonlifestyle@gmail. I closed my eyes. "Can you tell me the listed address?" She hesitated. "For security reasons." "It's fraud," I interrupted, calm and precise. "You're speaking to the victim. I can verify my driver's license and answer any security questions you want." After a pause, she relented. "The address is 49 Briar Ridge Lane, Asheville." Sable's house. Of course. When I hung up, I didn't throw the phone. I didn't cry. I just sat there, elbows on knees, breathing through the burn that rose from my stomach to my throat. They'd stolen my name, my credit, my history, and now they wanted to steal my identity altogether. Fine. They wanted war. They could have it documented. I opened my father's old USB again. I hadn't finished going through all the files last time. One folder near the bottom had always caught my eye, but I hadn't opened it yet. April. Office recording. For a moment, I stared at the title. Then I double-clicked. The audio was grainy, but clear enough. First, my father's voice, steady, tired, formal. So I'm updating the trust documents next week. Then Verena's voice, low and cautious. She doesn't need to know. We'll move the assets before probate's final. Sable chimed in with a laugh. Exactly. Dreama won't fight it. She never does. If she asks questions, we'll just say it was part of Dad's business trust. No one will check. No one listens to her. The recording continued, 23 minutes of them discussing how to quietly drain accounts, shift ownership titles, and alter the narrative before my father even passed. I stopped it halfway through, my hand trembling slightly. For years, I'd thought I was paranoid. For years, I'd told myself I must have misunderstood things, that maybe I was being too sensitive. But here it was. The proof. Their voices. The betrayal I'd always felt, now tangible. I replayed one part, again and again. My mother saying, "She doesn't need to know." Each time it hit, it sank a little deeper. They hadn't just stolen from me. They'd conspired while my father was still alive, while he trusted them. My jaw set. I organized everything, the audio file, the metadata, timestamps, copies of every relevant bank transaction. Then I composed an email to Jessica, my lawyer. The subject line was simple, trigger full response. I attached everything. No long explanations, no emotional appeals, just evidence. Within an hour, my phone buzzed. Jessica, this changes everything. We're going in. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the tension release in small bursts. Good, I whispered to the empty room. Let's make them feel what silence sounds like. The rest of the day unfolded like waiting for a storm to hit. I worked remotely, made tea, and kept refreshing my inbox even though I knew nothing would move until the next business day. But at 8 o'clock that night, I decided to make a move of my own. I logged into my dormant social account, the one I hadn't touched since Sable smeared me online. I updated the profile picture to a plain gray circle and typed one sentence as a post. Truth doesn't need polish, it just needs evidence. No hashtags, no comments open, no links. Then I added an image, a countdown timer. 72 hours. I hit post and logged out. Within minutes, my phone began lighting up. Notifications flooded my screen. People love a spectacle, even when they pretend they don't. My message spread fast, screenshotted, reposted, whispered about. Sable's page went eerily quiet. Her last post, Self-Care Weekend in Savannah, suddenly looked like a prelude to something she couldn't talk her way out of. Let her sweat. That night, I sat on my balcony with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders. The city lights below flickered, the sound of someone's television drifted faintly through an open window. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't scared. I wasn't waiting for someone to validate my pain. I had done that for myself. Forgiveness? That was never going to happen. Because forgiveness meant accepting they didn't know what they were doing. But they did. Every cut had been deliberate, every humiliation calculated. I thought back to a memory buried so deep it felt like another life. I must have been 7 or 8. Verena was cooking dinner, and I'd spilled a glass of milk. The glass shattered on the tile. She turned so fast her voice cut the air. "You were an accident, Dreama. You were the leftover baby. We never wanted a third." I remember the way she said it, not in rage, but in exhaustion, as if she were stating a simple fact, something the world already knew. I hadn't thought about that moment in years. But now, sitting there under the pale porch light, I realized something simple. I didn't need her love anymore, not even her apology. I didn't need to win a battle of hearts. I needed to win the truth. Before bed, I unplugged my phone, shut down every device, and finally lay back. For once, my dreams didn't twist or blur into nightmares. They were quiet, steady. I slept straight through until morning. When I woke, the light was gray and thin. I stretched, walked barefoot into the kitchen, and turned on the kettle. My apartment was silent except for the gentle hum of the fridge. Then, a knock. 3 soft taps against the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I padded across the floor and looked through the peephole. Verena stood there, alone, her hair pinned back too tightly, a manila folder pressed to her chest like a shield. Her lips were pale, her eyes watery. "We need to talk," she said when I opened the door, her voice cracking on the last word. But I wasn't opening the door for a conversation. I was opening it to end the war. I didn't speak right away when I opened the door. I stood just far enough back to block entry, watching my mother, no longer the sharp-tongued matriarch, but a woman who looked like she'd been aging in dog years these past few weeks. Her eyes didn't quite meet mine. Her lips were pale, pressed so tightly together that they nearly disappeared. In her arms, she clutched a manila folder like it held her last ounce of dignity. From the street, a car door slammed. I didn't need to look. Sable. I heard her heels clack against the sidewalk, fast but controlled, the way she always moved when she wanted to look collected while in crisis. "Drama," Verena started, her voice thin. "We didn't come to fight." I tilted my head slightly. "Then why are you here?" Verena opened the folder and extended it toward me, but I didn't take it. "It's all gone," she said quietly. "The money, the house. We're being audited. People are asking questions we can't answer." From behind her, Sable spoke up, less composed. "We made mistakes, okay? But we're still family. Family." That word again, like it meant something after all the files, all the silence, all the bruises no one asked about. I stepped outside and closed the door gently behind me, folding my arms. "You came all this way to say what? That you miss me? That you're sorry?" Verena swallowed. "We just want to fix things." I let the silence sit between us for a long moment before I replied. "You taught me something valuable. Blood is only thicker when it's not diluted with lies." I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a smaller envelope, sealed and labeled filed. I handed it to Verena. She looked at it like it might bite her. "That's the formal statement revoking any and all access to the estate funds. It's been filed with the court. It's final. Irrevocable." Verena's face twisted, but she didn't say a word. Sable took a step forward. "You're really going through with this?" I turned to her, calm as ever. "You posted my medical history online. You stole my credit. You told strangers I was dangerous, and now you're shocked that I won't play nice? You're punishing us," she snapped. "We're still your family." "No," I said evenly. Now you're just people I share some DNA with." I turned and walked back inside without waiting for a reply, shutting the door with a soft click. I didn't bother looking through the peephole. I already knew the faces they were making. That afternoon, I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and uploaded everything. Screenshots of messages, snippets of the audio files where they schemed, a side-by-side comparison of the fake will and the real one, and a photo, my face, bruised, swollen, with a timestamp from the night Sable hit me. No edits, no dramatization, just facts. The caption read, "Let this be a warning. Silence is not the same as weakness." Some of us were just saving our voices for the moment we needed them most. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't respond to comments. I didn't open the notifications after it went live. But I didn't have to. Within hours, the internet took over. By the next morning, Sable's influencer deals had started to drop her. Brands issued statements. One of them said, "We stand with survivors of family abuse and take privacy violations seriously." Her page went private before noon. Verena, I heard, had an unexpected visit from the ethics committee at the local education foundation she chaired. They were reviewing a series of personal donations that had never been properly documented. Family friends, ones who had always stayed neutral, who used to say things like, "You know how mothers are," or "Maybe Sable didn't mean it that way," started sending me messages. "We're sorry. We didn't know. You didn't deserve that. If there's anything you need." I didn't answer most of them, but I read every word. Not for validation, but because I needed to remember that I hadn't been crazy, that I wasn't alone. That Sunday, I took a drive out to the cemetery. It was cloudy but not cold, the kind of day that hovered somewhere between stillness and sorrow. I brought flowers, nothing fancy, just the kind Dad liked. Mum's, the ones that lasted. I knelt at his grave, took a deep breath, and placed a copy of the will beside the headstone. "I kept the family together, Dad," I said softly. "Just not the way they expected." No tears came, just air. just quiet. I stayed there until the wind picked up, then stood and walked slowly back to the car. I didn't look back. That evening, back in my apartment, I made tea and sat by the window. The light from the street lamps filtered through the curtains, soft and golden. I opened my laptop, stared at the blinking cursor on a blank document, and I typed, Chapter 1, the version of me they couldn't break. Because the story wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine. The days that followed weren't filled with victory. They were filled with silence, the kind that doesn't announce peace, but demands reflection. I wasn't dancing in triumph or basking in applause. I was breathing, finally, without a weight pressed on my chest. That was enough. After the post went viral, my inbox turned into a flood zone. Messages poured in from all corners. College classmates I hadn't spoken to in years, coworkers I barely remembered, strangers who said they saw themselves in my story. Some offered support, some asked invasive questions, some just said, "Thank you for saying it." But only one message mattered. It came 3 days later. A letter, not an email, handwritten, as if guilt needed to be filtered through ink to be real. Megan. The envelope was soft at the corners, like it had been held too long before being sent. Her handwriting was shaky. "I was afraid," she wrote. "You were right about them. I saw it. I just didn't want it to be true. And I didn't want to lose the only people who made me feel like I was in the loop. I chose comfort over loyalty. I'm sorry." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was truth, and it was enough to let me exhale a little longer than usual. In the days that followed, Verena vanished from public view. She sold the family house in Asheville, the one with the white columns and hydrangeas she never watered, the house that was supposed to be my inheritance, in name but never in presence. No press release, no tearful apology. She just disappeared. I heard she moved to a smaller town closer to the coast, a place where no one asked questions. Sable did what Sable always did when cornered. Deleted. Her social media platforms, her lifestyle blog, even her Pinterest boards, all gone. She didn't respond to the post. She didn't refute it. She didn't try to spin it. She vanished in a way that was louder than any statement she could have made. Jessica, my lawyer, called a week later to tell me everything was finalized. "It's all closed, legally, financially, publicly. You've won, Drema." I didn't cry, but I sat still for a long time, letting the finality soak into my bones. Some wounds don't bleed, they just whisper at night. A month passed. Quietly, I kept working, slowly, ate regular meals, walked in the mornings, and one morning, I did something unexpected. I opened the document I'd started when everything was burning down around me. Receipts was no longer just a folder, it was a memoir. I finished the last chapter in 2 sittings, sent it to a small self-publishing platform, no expectations. A week later, I got an invitation to speak on a local radio show. A soft-spoken host named Callie invited me to read an excerpt. My voice shook for the first 5 minutes, but I didn't stop. "I wrote this not for revenge," I told the host, "but because I got tired of being the footnote in other people's stories." That night, something shifted. I adopted a rescue dog. He was a mutt with a crooked ear and eyes that didn't quite match. They said he'd been abandoned by a family who moved without telling anyone. I named him Thurs. He followed me everywhere, into the kitchen, the bathroom, even the tiny pottery studio I joined on Saturdays. There, I learned how to shape things with my hands again. Clay didn't lie. It only became what you worked for it to become. I wasn't good at first, but the mess didn't scare me. I liked watching something misshapen smooth into form. I even managed to keep a basil plant alive. That felt bigger than it sounds. Spring came. And one Saturday afternoon, while picking up milk and flour, I saw her. Verena. In the canned goods aisle, alone. She looked thinner. Not in the glamorous magazine cover way, but in the way that says life had gotten heavier than she expected. Her eyes met mine. She stopped, then mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." I didn't nod. I didn't frown. I simply walked past her. She didn't follow. Some people think forgiveness is about giving the other person peace, but sometimes it's about finally giving yourself permission to stop hoping they'll change. I went home, poured a cup of tea, and sat at my desk. Thurs curled at my feet, snoring softly. I opened my journal, something I hadn't done in weeks, and wrote, "They never said my name when I was in the room. Now the world knows who I am. But more importantly, so do I." I closed the journal, turned off the lamp, and let the quiet fill the space. Because this was where I stopped being their story and started writing my own. What this story reminds us is simple. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people who were supposed to protect us. But silence isn't peace, and walking away isn't weakness, it's survival. And sometimes justice doesn't roar, it whispers through strategy, evidence, and truth. Have you ever had to cut off someone you loved just to save yourself? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone. And if this moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because we have more stories like this, and trust me, you won't want to miss the next one.